So here's what I've decided. This week we're only going to be doing finding side lengths and finding angle measures, and then we'll focus next week on angle of elevation, angle of depression, more of the application problems. So the homework, this homework number 2, will not be due until next Friday or next Thursday, sorry, because Friday is the start of spring break. And the quiz on Friday will just this Friday will just be finding side lengths and finding angle measures. And the next week's quiz will be on the application, angle of elevation, angle of depression. So I'll send you all that and remind to let you know, and I'll put that on Schoology. So right now I'm just going to go over 7, 8, 9, and 10, and then that's all you'll need to be responsible for this week's quiz. And then the homework, you can do those problems on the homework, and then turn in the homework by next Thursday. All right, so let's go to number 7. So before we can do number 7, if you look, we need to find an angle measure. So if we're going to set this up, we do just like we did before. Here's my angle. And what sides do I have in relation to this angle? We have the opposite side of the angle, and we have the adjacent side. Because this side over here is opposite the 90 degree, this is the hypotenuse. So that hypotenuse cannot be the adjacent side. 14 is the adjacent side. So if we set it up, which one has opposite and adjacent? That's right, tangent. So tangent is opposite over adjacent. So if we set this up, it'll be tangent of what angle do we have? Well, we have theta. Okay, so we put tangent of theta equals 8 over 14. So now we're stuck because we have theta stuck inside tangent. So how do we get theta by itself? How do we get rid of tangent? Well, if you look above here, we have the inverse of each ratio. I don't know if you've seen it. Let me see if I can get it here on my screen. Let's see, I'm trying, okay. So if you look, oh, I can't get it. If you look at your calculator, let's see if I can get this on here. Yes, so if you look at your calculator, you can see that above the sine, there is a sine -1. Above the cosine, there's a cosine -1. Above the tangent, there's a tangent -1. Every calculator is different, but you'll see this on your calculator, and you probably have to hit the second or shift key on whatever calculator you're using. Okay, so to do that, for instance, if I have sine theta equals x, in order to get the theta by itself, I would have to take the inverse. What's the opposite of doing sine? Well, the opposite of doing sine is inverse sine. So if I take the inverse sine of both sides, these would cancel and I'd be left with theta equals the inverse sine of x. Okay, same thing with cosine. If I have cosine of theta, an angle I don't know, equals something, I just take the inverse cosine of both sides. These cancel out and I'm left with theta equals inverse cosine of x, and I just punch that into my calculator. And the same thing with tangent. So if I go back to number 7, I have the tangent of theta equals 8 over 14. Well, I want to get rid of this tangent, so what's the opposite of doing tangent to an angle? Inverse tangent. But if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other. So this inverse tangent and tangent cancel out, so I get theta equals the inverse tangent of 8 over 14. So that's what you would have to put into your calculator. Be careful though, because I want to find the inverse tangent of this whole thing, 8 over 14. That's why I put in parentheses. So make sure when you put in your calculator, you put 8 over 14 in parentheses. So you're going to hit that inverse tangent on your calculator. So inverse tangent, and then you're going to put parentheses 8 divided by 14, and then hit enter. So let me show you what that looks like on my calculator. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so if you look here, that's what you're going to want to put on your calculator. The inverse tangent right, of 8 over 14 in parentheses, and then hit enter, and you get 29.744, which for our purposes, 29.7 is good enough degrees. And this is, since we're finding theta, don't forget, we're finding an angle measure. This is degrees. Okay, and make sure that your calculator says degrees in it again. This is degrees. We're not doing radians, so this has to say DEG or degrees, or sometimes it has a D or an R. Make sure it's in degree mode to get this. Okay. If you didn't understand what I was talking about, put questions in the comments, or you can send me questions on Remind. Okay, so let's go to number 8. So again, we have to identify what sides we have. So we have 40, it's opposite of the right angle, so this is the hypotenuse. And then here's our theta, here's our angle we're interested in. So 38, is that across from this angle, or is it next to the angle? Yes, it is next to the angle, so this is the adjacent side. So what trig ratio has adjacent and hypotenuse? Cosine, yes, cosine. So we're going to say the cosine of theta, because we don't know the angle, we're just calling it theta, equals the adjacent side, which is 38, over the hypotenuse, which is 40. And then to get the theta by itself, I need to get rid of that cosine. So what's the opposite of getting cosine? The inverse cosine, but I do it to both sides. And so these cancel, so I get theta equals the inverse cosine of, again, parentheses, 38 over 40. Then I punch that into my calculator. Second cosine of 38 divided by 40, making sure that that's in parentheses, and I hit enter. And you should see that on your calculator. The inverse cosine of 38 over 40 equals 18.19. The 9 makes the 1 round up, so it'll be 18.2. So make sure you punch it into your calculator like that. And so theta equals 18.2 degrees. Okay, so that's how we did 7 and 8. Make sure you understand, and if you have any questions, again, put in the comments or send it on Remind. You can hit pause right now and try 9 and 10, or 9 or 10 on your own, and then resume to see the answers. I'm going to go over those two right now, but there's 8. So here's number 9. So here's our theta. This 22, that's the opposite side of the 90-degree angle, so that's our hypotenuse. And then this side, the 17, is the opposite of the angle, the opposite side of the angle. So we have opposite, we have hypotenuse, so that is sine. So the sine of theta equals opposite over hypotenuse, 17 over 22. Now I want to get rid of sine, so I want to get theta by itself, so I find the inverse sine of both sides. And so these cancel, so theta equals the inverse sine, parentheses 17 over 22. I push into my calculator, and I get 17 over 22. And let me show you what I got on my calculator, just so you can see. So I got inverse sine of 17 over 22, and don't forget, put those parentheses around that. 17 over 22 equals 50.59, or we can say 50.6. That's fine. And don't forget degrees. Okay. Okay, hopefully you're getting the hang of this. Let's try one last one. So again, 48 is the opposite of the right angle, so this is the hypotenuse. And here's my theta, that's the angle I'm dealing with, and I have the side that's right next to it or adjacent to it. So adjacent hypotenuse, that is cosine of theta equals the adjacent over hypotenuse, or 11 over 48. And again, I want to get rid of that cosine, so I find the inverse cosine of both sides. These cancel. So theta equals the inverse cosine of 11 over 48. And if I punch that into my calculator, of 11 over 48, I get 76.75. And so there it is. Make sure you punch into your calculator like that if you can. 76.75, which is just 76.8. Don't forget degrees. All right, that's pretty much it, guys. So the first video showed you how to find side lengths using the trig functions, the trig ratios. This video showed you how to find angle measures using inverse trig ratios, right? Because we got to find out what the angle is. So the inverse trig ratios basically tell you what the angle is, because that's what we're trying to find. And again, if you have any questions, put them in the comments here, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Send them to me on Remind. And don't forget, this is what the quiz on Friday, tomorrow, is going to be, just on these two things, and you have until Sunday night to take that quiz. All right, let me know if you have any questions.